Here's the walk designed for a short afternoon stroll, with a chance to see one of Wensleydale's spectacular waterfalls. Askrigg used to be the main market centre of Upper Wensleydale and is the start of today's walk. We're sat here in the sunshine at the village of Askrigg, a relatively unspoilt and very attractive village. Number of the houses, 17th and 18th centuries, three-storey type houses. And this is the fictional Darrowby that was chosen by the BBC for the TV series All Creatures Great and Small. And just across the road from me is Skeldale House, which was used for the veterinary practice. And the church in the village is the largest one in the Dales. The tributary that runs at the side of the village is called Mill Gill, and it has a couple of waterfalls, and our walk today takes us up the stream side and through the woodland to see the waterfalls and up onto the tops of Low Straight Lane with a superb view across the Dale. Askrigg eventually lost its importance to Hawes during the 18th century. Nevertheless, its prosperity did continue in cheese making and textiles and the manufacture of long case clocks. In fact, anyone who owns an Askrigg made clock will have a prized item of craftsmanship. The clockmakers of Askrigg were famed for their skill and productivity. But for us, time marches on and we must be away out of the village. The road out of the village becomes a track which leads to Mill Gill, and then we're going to cut off here through this little narrow gate with the sign for Mill Gill Force, and then we join this remains of an old stone causeway or pannier way through the pasture up to the Mill Gill. The mill building at the end of this path dates back to manorial times, and it provided the power to grind the local corn into flour. Most of the machinery is now gone, but we walk under the metal channel of the mill race, which brought the water to the mill. By the end of the 19th century, it was in fact redundant for corn milling. Askrigg folk were the first in Wensleydale to enjoy the provision of electric light, because in 1908 a local entrepreneur, William Burton, used the machinery at Westmill to generate electricity and supplied it to the village. And this continued until the national grid arrived in 1948. It's a little bit of a steep climb up here. Steep bank running down, be careful, can be slippy in wet weather. Now we're onwards and upwards to the force itself. At Mill Gill Force, there is time to gaze at the torrent of water which cascades down a single 65-foot drop within the confines of the narrow gorge. The grey rocky wall at the top of the gorge is limestone. Below is a bed of sandstone with a darker layer of soft shale at the bottom. The shale is easily eroded by the constant fall of water, and as the shale gets worn away, the overhanging walls of the rock above collapse into the ravine. The broadleaf woodland of Mill Gill is composed largely of ash, beech and sycamore. It's a rich habitat for woodland birds, and in springtime there is a ground cover of bluebells and wood anemones. After the level track of Low Straits Lane, we turn right and down the steep hill back into Askrigg with a view across the valley of Adelborough. Another of the visitor attractions in Hawes is the rope maker, and we found time to call in and see what goes on in Wensleydale's only remaining rope makers. Good afternoon, Ruth. Pleased to see you. Yes, indeed.
This is Norman Chapman.
Hello, Norman.
Making rope.
And he's going to be making a rope.
Yes.
Well, while Norman's making a rope, obviously rope makers, as with many communities, they had their own rope makers. Why is it that declined in the communities over the years?
Well, as with the Hawes rope maker, they made for the local community. Most of our products were agricultural for use tying up and leading animals around. The animals have been replaced by tractors on the land, so that many rope makers disappeared, and our company got a bigger share of a diminishing market. And in the last 20 years, we've diversified the type of product we've made.
And what is Norman making for us now?
A cattle halter.
Out of the workshop and into the shop. There's a whole range of the goods produced in the ropery. Just across the car park from the rope maker is the Dales Countryside Museum, where we met the curator. What's the theme of our museum, Martin?
The theme of the museum is the people and landscape of the Pennine Dales. We're trying to get across the message that the landscape here is not man-made, it's neither wild nor natural. From earliest times, people have had an impact. I mean, here we see a model of the Roman fort at Bainbridge. So even when the Romans arrived, we think the landscape was largely cleared of trees, and that people are already into a system of using fields for farming. Or in fact, we were growing crops then, as well as...
And we've got that road running over the hillside.
And we've got the road running up the hillside,
yeah,
there, which you can still see today. And here we have where we're using artifacts. We're trying to show people the actual objects that people were using, and then reconstruct how people would have looked and the kind of landscape that they were living in at the time. So that you get the idea that the landscape has been changing continuously for many, many centuries.
So they're getting a chance to see how it was in the past and then what they can see in the Dales today.
Yes.
And here we're into the medieval times.
Yes, here we have one of the great sort of watersheds of Dales history, which was when the Norman invasion came. And this rather bloodthirsty individual was involved in sacking large areas of the Dales, large areas of the north of England, and they imposed a kind of whole new social system on the area. So the Norman was one of the crucial kind of cut-off points in the history of the Dales.
And then you've got your castles and abbeys left today.
Following on from that, they took the land for themselves. They built the castles, the monks built the abbeys. A lot of the monks actually established this system of sheep ranching that we get now on a very large scale. They were actually trading wool internationally. It wasn't just a kind of local activity.
Selling their wool to France
and
Flanders.
Sold the wool to Flanders and across to Belgium.
Well, it makes a very interesting museum.
Yeah, don't you think so?